This podcast is a personal exploration, rooted in curiosity, not conclusion. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a historian. I'm just someone who can't stop asking questions about where we came from, why the stories don't match, and what the truth might look like when you're not afraid to look directly at it. In this episode, we're not reading tablets or scripture. We're reading code, DNA, survival patterns, the blueprint of humanity, not carved in myth, but carried in blood. So if science makes you feel more grounded than Genesis, you're in the right place. And if science makes you nervous, just know this isn't about stripping away mystery. It's about showing that even in the lab, the spiral still spins. It's strange to think that for a species now overflowing the Earth, there was a moment when we almost didn't make it. Not metaphor, not myth, actual extinction. There may have been a time around 70,000 years ago when the entire human population shrank to fewer than 10,000 individuals. Some estimates go lower, as few as 2,000. That's less than the capacity of a village. Fewer than a small town's football crowd. This wasn't a war, not a punishment, not a divine flood. It was a supervolcano, a real one called Toba. When it erupted violently in what is now Indonesia, it blanketed the skies in ash, blocked out the sun, plunged the planet into volcanic winter, and nearly erased us. The Toba eruption is considered one of the most powerful volcanic events on Earth in the last 2 million years. Estimates suggest it ejected over 2,800 cubic kilometers of volcanic material and may have dropped global temperatures by several degrees for years. Some scientists believe this triggered a bottleneck in human evolution, a sharp reduction in population size, followed by limited genetic diversity. Others disagree. They argue that climate models and archaeological data don't support such a dramatic global freeze. Some regions even show continued human activity throughout the supposed bottleneck period. But here's what most do agree on. Something happened. Something that left a mark in our DNA. Human genetic diversity is unusually low for a species of our age and range. Compared to chimpanzees or gorillas, we're practically clones. That suggests a contradiction, a narrowing, like a line of ink forced through a pinhole. Population bottlenecks don't leave fossils, they leave patterns in genes. Repeating segments, lack of variation, telltale signatures that hint at how few ancestors we really had. Whether caused by Toba or climate collapse, or wave after wave of local extinctions, humanity came close to disappearing, and from that near erasure, we re-emerged. But not as one clean bloodline, as scattered fragments, pockets of survivors, a few camps huddled near water, one tribe here, 2 cousins there, one pregnant woman who made it just far enough to begin again. We weren't born in glory. We were scraped from the edge. We were the thread that didn't snap. And from that thread, the whole tapestry of humanity had to be rewoven. This moment, this bottleneck, isn't just a story of survival. It's the origin of why we are so genetically similar. Why tracing DNA often leads to shared ancestors. Why you can find distant cousins in villages you've never heard of, on continents you've never walked. The spiral tightened there. The code curled inward. The diversity collapsed to a whisper. But somehow it held. And that's where the real story begins. She wasn't the first woman. She wasn't the only woman. She wasn't called Eve. Not by her people. But she is in all of us. Mitochondrial Eve is the name we give to the most recent common matrilineal ancestor of every human alive today. That means, if you trace your mother's 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 mother and keep going back far enough, you'll eventually arrive at the same woman as everyone else on Earth. Not because she was special, but because everyone else's lines ended. Mitochondrial DNA, or mtDNA, is passed only from mothers to children, not through sperm, but through the egg's cytoplasm. It's small, just 37 genes, but incredibly stable, because it doesn't recombine like nuclear DNA. It mutates at a relatively predictable rate, which makes it perfect for tracing maternal ancestry across thousands of generations. It's like a tiny genetic breadcrumb trail that leads all the way back to her. By comparing mtDNA from people all over the world, scientists have found that everyone shares a common female ancestor who lived roughly 150,000 to 200,000 years ago, most likely in East Africa. Not the first woman, just the one whose daughters had daughters, who had more daughters, who led to us. Her lineage is the one that made it through the genetic bottlenecks. All the others faded away. She is not in the Bible, but she is in your cells. So what could her life have been like? Mitochondrial Eve lived during a time when survival meant constant movement. Her people were foragers, following the rains, the rivers, the game. She may have lived in a small band, maybe 30 people, a mix of kin and companions huddled around fires, wrapped in hide. No cities, no written language, no metal, no gods carved in stone, just bone tools, ochre paint, sharpened flint, and instinct. She wouldn't have known her significance. She wouldn't have known what DNA was. But her mitochondria? They were replicating all the while, quietly ensuring that part of her would endure longer than any monument. And yet, if the mitochondrial Eve is in all of us, then we are all related. Hi! Which means that long before royal incest, or bloodline myths, or chosen tribes, we were already inbred. Not shamefully, and not sinfully, just statistically. In small populations, it's unavoidable. You survive with whoever's left. And if only one woman's mitochondrial line survived, then every person alive today descends from a family that got very, very small. It wasn't paradise. It was survival. And that survival left marks. And mitochondria never forget. If mitochondrial Eve is the mother in all of us, where was her man? Science calls him Y-chromosomal Adam, the most recent common paternal ancestor of every man alive today. But don't get swept up in the Genesis imagery, because here's the twist. He and Eve didn't know each other. They didn't live at the same time, and they weren't a couple. The Y chromosome, like mitochondrial DNA, is a non-recombining segment. It passes only from father to son, and accumulates mutations over generations. By comparing these Y chromosome changes across male lineages, scientists traced all living male lines back to a single man who likely lived around 60,000 to 90,000 years ago, much later than mitochondrial Eve. So what happened? Why the gap? Because men's lines die out faster. If a man doesn't have sons, his Y chromosome stops there. Warfare, infertility, being socially outcomped, all of it matters. In contrast, mitochondrial DNA passes on to both sons and daughters, but only daughters can continue the line. Eve's lineage simply lasted longer. Adam's took longer to coalesce. The names are symbolic. They don't represent a real pair who looked at each other over a fire. They're statistical nodes on the genetic tree, the last common ancestors of surviving male and female lines. If anything, the gap between their lifespans reveals just how messy, fragmented, and unpredictable the human story really is. Our deepest roots weren't planted in Eden. They were scattered in the dust, bent by drought, by time, by randomness, and somehow they held. Because the story of humanity isn't linear, it's a lattice, a spiral. And somewhere along that spiral, two different ancestors left just enough of themselves for us to be here today. We don't like the word inbreeding. It feels wrong, taboo, like something that should only happen in royal scandals or remote horror stories. But here's the uncomfortable truth. We are all, on some level, the product of inbreeding. Not by fault, not by shame, by math. Early humans lived in small groups, maybe 20 to 50 individuals per band. They were hunter-gatherers, constantly moving, vulnerable to weather, scarcity, predators, and each other. And when your entire tribe is a handful of families, your mating pool is very shallow. Most early humans likely partnered with relatives, cousins, second cousins, even siblings when choices ran thin. In these closed loops, genetic drift kicks in. Random traits get amplified, weaknesses can stack, and mutations can sweep through a group rapidly. But sometimes helpful mutations, like stronger immune responses, better heat regulation, sharper cognition, also get reinforced. It wasn't just inbreeding. It was adaptation under pressure. We can see this now. With the technology to extract DNA from ancient bones, we've sequenced what are known as ancient genomes, the full set of DNA recovered from prehistoric remains. These aren't theories. They are genetic time capsules. Take the case of a girl from Denisova cave in Siberia. Her remains are around 80,000 years old. Scientists sequenced her genome and found something striking. Her DNA contained long stretches of identical code, inherited from both her mother and her father. That only happens when your parents share a very recent common ancestor. In her case, they were likely half-siblings, uncle-niece, or aunt-nephew. And she's not alone. Across early Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, and Denisovans, the signs of inbreeding are everywhere. The genetic data reveals repeated patterns of close relative reproduction, not over centuries, but sometimes within a single generation. And yet, despite this, we survived. From tiny gene pools, fragmented migrations, and barely enough people to form a village, we made it through. Our genomes today carry the traces, glitches, mutations, redundancies, but also the resilience. We didn't evolve through divine design or perfect planning. We evolved through grit, through improvisation, through whatever and whoever was left. We didn't get here by being perfect. We got here by not disappearing. Once upon a time, we weren't the only humans on Earth. There were others. Neanderthals, Denisovans, and possibly more unknown names lost in the soil. They weren't beasts. They weren't broken prototypes. They were human, just different kinds. And for a time, they walked beside us. Neanderthals lived across Europe and Western Asia. They were shorter, stockier, with large brains and strong hands. They made tools, used fire, buried their dead, possibly mourned, possibly prayed. The Denisovans are more elusive. They left no full skeleton, just fragments, a finger bone, a tooth, a jaw, but they left us something more intimate, their genes. We didn't even know they existed until 2010, when scientists sequenced the DNA from a single girl's finger bone found in the Denisova cave in Siberia that I mentioned earlier. That one genome did two things. It revealed an entire species of ancient human we'd never recorded in any history, and it showed unmistakable signs of close inbreeding, long stretches of identical DNA from both parents, meaning her mother and father were likely related. Her body gave us both a missing piece of the family tree and a glimpse into the genetic compromises of survival. And she wasn't alone. Other remains were found in the same cave. Large molars with strange robust shapes belonging to different Denisovans. And then there was Denny. A single bone fragment revealed she was the child of a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father, a literal first-generation hybrid. Even stranger, a jawbone found in a Tibetan cave, 160,000 years old, held no DNA, but the proteins inside matched Denisovan markers. That meant Denisovans had adapted to high altitudes and passed that adaptation on to modern Tibetans. So while they left few bones, they left a legacy across mountains, islands, and now living rooms. When modern humans migrated, we didn't just conquer new lands. We encountered others. And not just with spears or suspicion. We interbred. You, right now, may carry Neanderthal DNA, especially if you're European or Asian descent. Today, nearly all known African humans carry traces of Neanderthal DNA. Denisovan DNA is rarer. It appears only in certain populations, like those in Papua New Guinea, Australia, and parts of Southeast Asia, with people carrying up to 5% Denisovan DNA. But not only there. A few months ago, my husband decided to check his own ancestry with a DNA test. I mean, we know by now that this podcast started with him going down his ancestry, right? I love it. Absolutely love it. And, you know, all the questions that come up with it, all the history lessons. Honestly, it's great. Great thing to do as well. Go and do your own. Absolutely worth it. I'm just about to do mine as soon as I can. Go and do it. He decided to check his own DNA, right? So he actually carries Denisovan DNA. It's a small percentage, but it's there. A whisper of ancient blood, still echoing in the cells of a man I share my life with. It's not theoretical for us. It's in the house. So what happened exactly between modern humans and these ancient cousins? We don't know every detail, but we have theories. Some encounters were likely peaceful. Shared food, shared shelter, shared bodies. Other times it may have been coerced, survival-based, even violent. We find traces of both romance and resistance in the archaeological and genetic record. But what matters is, it happened, and their legacy lives on, in our immune systems, in our skin, in our tolerance to cold, even in how our bodies handle altitude. They didn't vanish. They became part of us. Not once, not in secret, repeatedly, across continents. This wasn't just prehistoric flirtation. It was absorption. They didn't vanish. They became part of us. When we speak of ancestors, we imagine names, places, graves, rituals. But DNA doesn't need tombstones. It remembers through presence. And sometimes you find out the person sleeping beside you is carrying the echo of an entire lost people in his blood. How many ghosts are in your genes? Let's talk about something awkward. Something that still gets whispered at dinner tables, printed in nationalist manifestos, or passed down in subtle poisonous phrases like, pure blood, our kind, they're not really from here. In reality, humanity has never been pure. We are and have always been a genetic mosaic, a tangled braid, a brilliant mess of mixing. And that's not weakness, that's survival. The idea of a pure human bloodline isn't just biologically inaccurate, it's dangerous. Every time we trace ancient genomes, we find complexity, we find admixture, we find crossing. Even the girl from the Denisova cave, who carried clear signs of inbreeding, was the product of an environment where survival sometimes meant keeping things close. Too close. But zoom out, and the human story is full of movement, migrations across continents, marriages across tribes, children born of conquest, curiosity, desperation, or love. We are the result of all of it. There is no master blueprint. There is no untainted route. Just variation, interweaving, adaptation. And the more we study ancient DNA, the more we realize some of those adaptations saved us. And yet, the myth of purity persists in ideologies, in dogma, in genocide. It gets weaponized, used to divide, erase, and control. You've seen it in history books, political speeches, even family gossip. The idea that some lineages are cleaner, closer to the divine, more worthy of legacy. But science tells another story. The more we decode ancient DNA, the more we learn that every human alive today is here because somebody, somewhere, crossed a line, a border, a boundary, a belief. And from that came you. And here's where things get beautifully ironic. By interbreeding with Neanderthals and Denisovans, Homo sapiens didn't just mix genes. We acquired entire survival kits. One of the most crucial gifts? Immunity. Neanderthals and Denisovans had been living in Eurasia for hundreds of thousands of years before modern humans arrived. During that time, they developed resistances to Eurasian pathogens, diseases that emerged from dense populations, close contact with animals, and cold climates. These included things like influenza, tuberculosis, typhus, possibly early forms of herpes viruses. We, fresh from the African cradle, didn't stand a chance, unless we interbred. And we did. Through those unions, our ancestors inherited key immunity genes like the HLA complex, short for human leukocyte antigen system. It's like the immune system's memory palace, helping your body recognize and respond to invading viruses and bacteria. Many of us today carry HLA variants that come from Neanderthals and Denisovans, giving us better defense mechanisms against diseases we wouldn't have been ready for. The IPAS1 gene. This one is mind-blowing. Found in Denisovan DNA and still present in many modern Tibetans, this gene helps the body regulate red blood cell production in low oxygen environments. In other words, it lets you survive at high altitudes. Denisovans had this adaptation long before we got there, and today it still lives in the blood of those who dwell among the mountains. We didn't just conquer new lands. We absorbed the wisdom of those who lived there first, through blood. This wasn't moral purity. It was evolutionary pragmatism. It might be confronting, depending on what you were taught, but you're not the exception. You are, biologically, ancestrally, a remix. Your bones carry the story of countless unions, some sacred, some complicated, some you'll never know the names for. You are evidence that purity was never the goal. Survival was. And survival meant connection, not walls, but bridges. Every cell in you carries the signature of a long-forgotten handshake, a merging, a chance taken. You're not pure. You're proof. After all the ancient cousins, the shared genes and ghost lineages, we need to talk about us, Homo sapiens, The last hominin species left standing, the storytellers, the architects, the destroyers, the dreamers, the species that not only survived but took over. Homo sapiens emerged somewhere around 300,000 years ago, probably in East Africa. We weren't suddenly born from a single couple or a magical spark. We evolved gradually, through a shifting mix of hominin groups, mutations, adaptations, and environments. Our story isn't a straight line. It's more like braided rivers. And those rivers eventually merged into something we now call us. We had something new, something strange, not just longer limbs or finer tools, but cognition, language, imagination, abstraction. And once those emerged, we explored. Here's the mystery. Neanderthals had big brains too. Denisovans were strong and adapted to harsh terrain. Other hominins made tools and maybe even art. So why did we win? Scientists point to several possibilities. Cognitive flexibility, the ability to adapt ideas quickly. Complex language, allowing strategy, teaching, long-distance planning. Symbolic thinking, burying our dead, painting on cave walls. Social networks, forming larger groups, sharing knowledge between them. Basically, we cooperated better, we remembered better, we imagined further, and that made all the difference. We could pass on knowledge, not just genes. We became culture bearers, and with that came firelight stories, sacred burials, and migration maps carved into memory. From Africa, Homo sapiens began to spread, slowly, unevenly, sometimes doubling back. We moved into the Middle East, then Europe, then Asia, and eventually across to Australia and much later the Americas. And as we traveled, we encountered other humans, Neanderthals, Denisovans, maybe others we still don't know about. We fought, we bred, we shared, we stole, we survived. And each of those encounters left echoes in our genes. But somehow, we are the ones who lasted. Not the smartest, not the strongest, just the most adaptable. Neanderthals disappeared around 40,000 years ago. Denisovans were not sure, but they faded too. Other hominins like Homo floresiensis, the hobbit, and Homo luzonensis vanished quietly, island by island. And it wasn't always genocide. It wasn't always mercy. Sometimes the population just shrank, starved, died of disease, merged. Sometimes we absorbed them. Other times we outcomed them. But the outcome was always the same. One human species left. Just one. Homo sapiens. We became the storytellers, the final draft, the branch that didn't break. But we didn't carry just our own genes. We carried theirs, the ones we absorbed, loved, conquered, mourned. Their DNA still speaks in our bones, in our lungs, in our eyes. We didn't win because we were pure. We won because we were able to hold complexity, because we would become more. Homo sapiens means wise man, but wisdom isn't clean. It's layered, messy, and it remembers. For every Neanderthal or Denisovan we've come to recognize, there are other names, or rather, other absences that hang heavy in the fossil record. They lived, they thrived, they carved tools, shared fire, and may have spoken languages lost to time. But they left no descendants, not that we know of. And in their silence we feel an ache, a knowing, that the human story was never a straight line, but a wild braid of experiments, adaptations, and disappearances. In 2003, a team of archaeologists made an astonishing discovery. In the Liang Bua cave, on the Indonesian island of Flores, a tiny adult skeleton. At first it seemed like a child, but closer study revealed something far more unexpected. This was a fully grown adult of a previously unknown human species, standing just over 3 feet tall with a brain the size of a grapefruit. They named her Homo floresiensis, though the world quickly renamed her the Hobbit. Despite their small stature and brain size, these beings were not primitive. They made stone tools, they hunted dwarf elephants, they likely controlled fire, and most remarkably, they lived until about 50,000 years ago, which means when modern humans began spreading into Southeast Asia, the hobbits were still alive. In the oral traditions of Flores, there are old tales of the Ibu Gogo, small hairy people who spoke in murmurs and stole food. Some villagers believed they once lived in the forests until they were driven away or died out. Folklore? Maybe, but maybe not. Sometimes myth remembers what history forgets. In 2013, deep inside the Rising Star Cave system in South Africa, a team of scientists and cavers crawled through a narrow chute no wider than a child's shoulders and emerged into a chamber filled with bones. Hundreds of them, all from a species we have never seen before. Homo naledi. They were strange, slender, with small brains, around a third the size of modern humans. But they moved upright, they made tools, and most puzzling of all, they may have deliberately placed their dead in the darkness of the cave. There were no signs of predators dragging the bodies in, no flooding, no random scattering. It looked intentional. Burial, or at least something eerily close to it, by beings we thought were too primitive for such acts. Even more astonishing, dating showed they lived around 250,000 years ago. That's the same era Homo sapiens was emerging in Africa. Two kinds of human, one with a big brain and symbolic art, another with a small brain and a ritual instinct, sharing the same continent. Who knew about whom? Who saw the other in the trees across the firelight? We don't know, but we know they were there. Every time we think we've filled in the family tree, something shakes loose. A jawbone in a cave, a molar in a museum drawer, a fragment of DNA that doesn't match anything we've catalogued. What these species tell us is this: we were never alone. Homo sapiens was not the climax of evolution. We were one variation among many, one voice in a scattered choir. And even now, scientists keep finding clues that suggest the presence of what they call ghost lineages, unknown ancient humans whose genes still linger in some populations, but whose bones we haven't found. Maybe we will. Maybe we won't. But either way, they shaped us. Not with monuments, but with murmurs. Not through conquest, but through presence. They didn't leave kingdoms. They didn't leave names. But they were here. And maybe being human doesn't mean being the last one standing. Maybe it means being shaped by the ones who didn't get to finish their stories. By now you might be wondering, why us? Why did Homo sapiens survive when other branches, the Neanderthals, Denisovans, floresiensis, erectors, eventually disappeared? Was it luck? Timing? Divine favor? Maybe a bit of all three. But science has a few guesses too, and they don't point to strength or even purity. They point to something messier, something more human. Let's look at 3 traits that might have tipped the scale in our favor. Cognitive flexibility. Homo sapiens could adapt in real time. We didn't just follow routine. We could change course, shift strategies, invent symbols, tell stories, imagine the future. That gave us an edge in chaos. Complex language. We could teach what we knew, pass on hunting techniques, herbal knowledge, dangers, myths, across generations. That meant every death didn't reset the species. It taught us. Cooperation beyond kin. This one matters. Neanderthals likely cooperated too, but mostly in small family-bound groups. Homo sapiens? We learned to collaborate with strangers, trade, share, form alliances across rivers and deserts and bloodlines. That made us a network, not just a tribe. Want something wild? Our breath might have helped us survive. Not metaphorical breath. Real physiological lung capacity. Recent studies suggest that the shape of our rib cage and diaphragm... Am I saying this right? Diaphragm? Maybe not. As you say it. Gave us better oxygen efficiency. That matters in long-distance travel, in heat, in harsh climes, in endurance hunts. We were the marathon runners of the Pleistocene. Not stronger, just longer. Add to that sweat glands and our ability to cool down without panting, and suddenly we could chase prey for hours while our competitors overheated. Sometimes evolution doesn't reward the fastest. It rewards the ones who don't stop. Remember the messy bloodlines? They gave us more than awkward family reunions. They gave us immunity upgrades. When Homo sapiens interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans, we didn't just mix genes for cheekbones or hair color. We acquired resistance. Resistance to viruses, bacteria, harsh climates, low oxygen at high altitudes. We now know that several Neanderthal genes boosted our innate immune response. Some Denisovan DNA, like the EPAS1 gene, helps modern Tibetans survive with less oxygen, and the HLA complex, inherited from both, strengthened how we detect and fight disease. The mixed bloodlines didn't weaken us, they armored us. Homo sapiens wandered further. We crossed deserts, rivers, mountain passes, coastlines. We built boats, we navigated by the stars. We migrated when we didn't have to, just to see what was beyond the horizon. There's something deeply human about that urge, and it gave us one huge advantage: dispersal. When crisis hit, climate shifts, droughts, diseases, our people weren't all in one place. We were spread, scattered, mobile, and that meant we didn't all fall at once. Some of us always made it through. It wasn't just brain size, or brawn, or technology. It might have been the things we overlook. Art, grief, care for the injured, the willingness to carry a child that wasn't ours, to bury a friend, to paint a dream on a cave wall, to remember. Those things, that softness, might be why we're still here. Not because we were the best, but because we were the most bonded. We didn't survive because we were pure. We survived because we were mixed, mobile, imaginative, and strange. We survived because we were human, all the way down. We have to go back, not to the myths, not to the science, just to the spiral. That little curve we see everywhere, in ferns, in galaxies, in your fingerprints, in DNA. The spiral doesn't end. It bends, it loops, it brings you back to the same place, but with a deeper view. That's the story of us. Not linear, not pure, not chosen. Spiraled. From gods and serpents, from bone and breath, from lovers who weren't supposed to meet, from ancestors who crossed borders and bloodlines, from extinction that almost took us, from the fire that didn't. We survived, not because we were strong, but because we were strange. Not because we were chosen, but because we chose each other. Mixed, messy, mutable, and still here. So if you're listening to this, wondering where you belong, look to the spiral. Because no matter where you started, no matter who your ancestors were, you're part of the pattern. You carry the memory. You are the myth. You are the bloodline. And maybe, just maybe, the spiral doesn't begin on Earth at all. Maybe it came from somewhere else. In the next episode, we're leaving soil behind and reaching into space. We're asking a different kind of question. What if life didn't start here? What if Earth was the cradle, but not the spark? And I need to just say something at the end of this episode, okay? I mean, it's amazing, like the chances of survival for us. It doesn't matter how you even look at it. The chances of you being here in this moment, in this Earth, in this place, the chances of you existing, if you go down your ancestral tree, if you go back in your family and you go back and you go back and you go back, the amount of people needed to have existed for you to be here right now, in this moment, as you are, that is special. That's your spark. It's amazing. Sorry, I just had to bring it because he does like to remind me of that quite a lot. I wonder why. Then again, we do go down many, many rabbit holes, so...
And by he, I mean, of course, my husband, my soulmate.
He is my anchor, so it's good when he anchors me back and he makes me realize just how precious and how grateful we should all be for just existing. Anyways, if you have thoughts, questions, theories, your own strange ancestral thread to pull, anything, I love to talk. So if you love to talk, if you have questions, if you just want to follow the story, come and find me on Instagram at Bloodline Myths. Every tangled story is welcome. And don't forget, every 2 weeks, new threads, new episodes. See you in the spiral. Bye!